On today's episode, we're talking about why learning from other agency owners can accelerate growth and sharpen your perspective. We'll share how surrounding yourself with peers often helps you see patterns and avoid blind spots. It's not about copying what works for others, it's about understanding why it works and how it fits in your own context.
All right, so this is a topic that's near and dear to our hearts. So, I mean, it took me back when we kind of thought about this as a topic. So, back in the day, especially when we were starting out, I think the first few years, we were very much like kept to ourselves. Like, we were just so, like, we didn't want any input. We just wanted to do exactly what we wanted to do. But of course, that was a little bit of a youthful foolishness. And so, over time, we realized, hey, maybe we should get some more mentorship. Maybe we should get an idea of what other people who are further along in their careers or in their with their business are doing. And we took the other track, which was we started to just reach out to random agency folks, agency owners, whoever we just look up or we just read about them on a blog or something or come across them in magazines and we look them up and we start just emailing. I think we would just email like info at whatever the company was and
Yeah.
just be like, just try to get a meeting with them. Obviously it was easy in New York City, but then we also made it a part of our travel. Like if we're visiting LA, San Francisco, Toronto, Vancouver, wherever we were going, we just look up some of these people, and some were actually heroes. Like we'd follow them on their blogs, and like we kind of be like, "Wow, like one day we could build an agency like theirs." And I think we'd made that, and that was kind of the start of this kind of learning from other agency folks.
Yeah, the surprising thing was early on when, it's a couple guys, maybe a few other people, we would reach out to these people we look up to, peers, and the fact that they would, number one, respond, but also set aside time, in some cases, several hours to just sit down with us and talk to us about their business and be super transparent. Yeah, we're very grateful for people opening up the door for
Yeah,
us.
no,
Mhm.
100%. And I mean, a lot of what we do today, hopefully we're providing value, sharing a lot of stuff, is probably because of the positive experience we had and others being so generous with their time and knowledge, information, and things like that. So, yeah, I think that it all goes back to, yeah, we want to pay that forward as much as possible. So a lot of this, initially was done through these like one-to-one kind of meetings that we would try to do, but eventually we were able to come across some communities, and I think that really accelerated that even further, where you could get in a room with many other agency owners and learn from them. So maybe we could talk about some of these communities and like, yeah, first of all, maybe like why communities? First, like just to take a step back, like why is joining a community a positive thing?
Yeah, I think expanding on that one-to-one relationship, talking to one agency owner, a community opens you up to so many people. All and communities can be in the same kind of industry and type of business that you're in, or adjacent, where they might be like another professional services organization, not in design or marketing or technology per se, but they have a similar perspective and story that you can learn from. And I think honestly, it's just about getting perspective from other people. There's no like playbook exactly on how to do these things, and you want to learn about how everyone has got into what they're doing, how they've navigated the similar challenges that you might be having, and yeah, hopefully through all of that, just spur new ideas for how you approach your business.
Yeah, definitely. We could talk about a few specific communities that have really helped us along the way. So maybe we could drop some names of communities that have worked for us. I mean, longtime members of the Bureau of Digital, even before it was kind of officially Bureau of Digital, it was these series of events called owner camps. And so that those were
Mhm.
really cool. I remember going to one of the early ones like over a decade ago. And it was awesome. You just go away with 20, 25 other agency owners to a remote location, just spend time with them, hang out. And then there's these sessions where there's a lot of different themed knowledge share. And that just was incredible. And this was at a time when just I was ignorant of so many things and just all these different ways of like, wow, like this is how business can be done. This is what people know. It was just really stimulating to say the least. And, there's some folks that I met 10 plus years ago who I've remained friends with to this day. And so I think that also was a great experience. And so, yeah, so something like that has been really instrumental to our growth.
Yeah, definitely. Another one that comes to mind is a group called SODA, the Society of Digital Agencies. And that one is a lot of leaders in the digital creative technology space. We were invited to that organization about 10 years ago by another agency owner who had found a lot of benefit from it. And for that, when we first joined, it was a much smaller, like 30, 40 agencies maybe. Now it's kind of grown. They've added 5 agencies a year for the past 10 years, and it's probably over 100 people now. But when we started out, it was a very kind of small, close-knit group of people. They do an annual global member meeting in different locations. I remember there's one in Barcelona, like that was probably the first one we went to. And like you're in like this amazing location, you're talking to all these agency owners who are so many of whom are much further along in the journey. So like we look up to these business owners, and the biggest thing that was enlightening was like they're so transparent about everything from like finances, like how much do they make, like what kind of profit, to how do they handle their team and their processes. And it was mind-blowing how open everyone was, and it's everyone had like a an abundance mindset where you know nothing here is a secret sauce that needs to be hidden behind closed doors. Let's share it with you, and there's enough, more than enough business to go around for everybody. So that was like a wonderful experience. They do that global member meeting every year, but then also being in New York, there's a obviously a big concentration of agencies where they did local events where they got like external like corporate sponsors to come in and do talks, and it just was a great way to just meet more people, more agency peers that it's hard to do when it's just like one to one, or you might be like hesitant to reach out to someone who's in a many 100,000 person agency, like the founder or the leader of that. So that's been a great group to be part of.
And the
Yeah.
other thing about Soda is that you get exposure not just to agencies in the US, but also internationally. So you get a different perspective and flavor there of like, hey, folks in Europe, Asia, Australia, like what are they kind of seeing in their markets and how are they interacting with the North American market? So I always found that fascinating as well, of like you get a totally different perspective than just domestic agencies.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then one more I just want to throw in there because I was there at the annual, they call it the reunion, is Collective 54. So this one, a little bit different in that it's not just agency geared, but just professional services overall. So the founder, Greg Alexander, had a successful exit with his professional services firm, and he wrote the book called The Boutique, which I came across that book on the recommendation of an agency friend, and I ended up liking the book a lot, and then realized that Greg had started this community called Collective 54. So we joined it, and yeah, it's been really inspiring. And for that one, a lot of it is about scaling the business and then getting to an eventual exit. And so you learn a lot. They do a lot of learnings to help you kind of think about scaling. And then even at the reunion where the members get together once a year in person, they put on a lot of really great kind of sessions around how certain members achieved very successful exits and what that process was like, what what took to get there, and then also like how was that structured, who was involved in helping to get that deal across the finish line. So for us, especially as we're engaging in a lot of the M&A type of work on the barrel holding side, it's been very instructional and inspirational as well. So in that way, we continue to get value from these communities.
Yeah, Collective 54 is an interesting one because it's very structured in the way that they organize. So they put you in a group of, I'll call it 10 other agencies, and you meet on a monthly cadence where you go through, and there are different topics that you can kind of cover, but it's hopefully agencies in the same phase of their journey, whether they're scaling, growing, ready to exit, but it's all different industries. It doesn't have to be just marketing. It could be all kinds of professional services groups. And then they do a weekly podcast where they interview different agency owners, and that becomes a topic where people can dial in and do like a conversation with the person who recorded the podcast. So there's a lot of layers that they've kind of structured in to really allow you to have exposure to different people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, like agencies do make up a big part of that membership, but then there are others like accounting firms, IT,
Yeah, law firms. Yeah.
law firms,
Yeah.
investment
Yeah.
banks. So it's a professional services group. So like, I think, and it's interesting because like even more recently, there's been subgroups that have formed where just agencies gotten together to form a group as well on top of the mixed groups as well. So it's been a interesting development for how they're structuring it. But then, yeah, definitely like they are very kind of, in some ways you could say prescriptive about certain ways to achieve the successful outcome that's kind of modeled on the founder. And
Yeah.
yeah, these groups, which they call leadership boards, are very much kind of representative of some of these other kind of communities that exist out there. So EO, YPO, I think Hampton is another one where a lot of different entrepreneurs or founders come together with their businesses, and they can kind of form these groups, some call it forums, where maybe it's a handful of people that get together every month for large swaths of time. I think Vistage is another one too, where they're getting together to just talk about both personal and professional challenges and helping each other through knowledge share to kind of navigate those things.
Yeah, definitely. We've covered agency specific, but also like Collective 54 more industry cross industry networks. And it's interesting because we started out very much on the let's go find peers doing exactly what we do and how do we learn from that. And I think that really helps you think about like your specific type, your craft, your agency, like how you can run operationally things better or expand your change how you do pricing. And it's like a very specific and almost tactical way to look at it. And then the cross industry stuff is like, wow, like you get like a whole different perspective to businesses that you've never seen before, but they're kind of related. So you can take learnings from a law firm and how do you apply to a marketing agency? And I think that like cross sharing is really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think the deeper you get in understanding your own business model and like how your business runs, you realize that like good ideas can come from anywhere, and you can apply those things, and it's just more fuel, more ideas. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I think going beyond just an agency specific community can be helpful for that broader perspective. Let's talk
Yeah.
about maybe you pick a community to join. What are some ways that as a new member you can get the most out of a community? Because sometimes people just join communities, but maybe they're too busy or whatever it is. And like I think if you're going to invest dollars and just commit to a community, there's actually a way to show up, I think, that is going to get you the most value.
Yeah. I think one of the like most important things like starting with your mindset, like when you're coming in with like a curious mindset of like how do I learn as much as possible versus like yeah, I know everything and you have some ego, you want to tell everyone how it's done kind of thing because just have an open mind on how others are doing things and coming with that curiosity mindset. I think yeah, starting there. But then that being said, try to contribute and be an active participant as much as you can. So as much as you're absorbing what other people are sharing, like share your own lessons because maybe there is something that you've experienced that others can benefit from. And also the more that people hear from you and hear your story, it kind of builds your kind of reputation and awareness and the people can kind of trust what you're saying the more that you're out there.
Thanks for listening to Agency Habits Podcast. A quick heads up, Barrel Holdings is acquiring agencies. We look for profitable firms with durable revenue and strong teams. If you're thinking about succession, de-risking, or scaling with a partner, visit barrel-holdings.com to see our buy box and set up a confidential call. Thanks.
One of the important lessons. So I remember I was in EO briefly, and they kind of go there. There's some things that they train you on as part of the onboarding, and one of the things that you should avoid is the kind of prescriptions for other people. So telling people, hey, you shouldn't do this, you should do this, etc. Like just kind of telling people what to do. And instead kind of flipping that to be like, hey, in that situation, this is what I did. Like when that happened to me, or hey, if I was in that position, this is how I would have handled it, or this is how I handled that situation in the past. And so that way it's just more of less of a hey, like I know better than you, I'm telling you what to do, and more of like a hey, this is one way in which that problem was solved. And I think that it just provides for much better flow of conversation and open-mindedness on all sides.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is when you're hearing people's stories and their experiences, like really understanding like what was the thought process that went behind it. It's easy to say, all right, like this agency who's successful did this. Like they got rid of time tracking. All right, we got to do that. Like whatever it is, like without really understanding why they did, all the things that led up to it, all the other downstream impacts, you like latch on to the surface level tactics. Because if you're in a room with a lot of people who throw around ideas and experiences, it's easy to jump onto things. So I think that's something to be mindful of when
Yeah. And we're going to dive into that very
yeah.
thing just after kind of maybe one more point on like getting the most out of the community. And so I think the final point here is like you're here to build real relationships. And so I think you get out what you put in, and a lot of it is you have to put in the time and the effort to get to know other people and just really develop a connection. And I think obviously it's really hard. Let's say the community is a few hundred people. It's really hard to get to know everybody, really well. But inevitably, you're gonna find a handful of people that you're gonna click with, and I think it's really important to continue to follow up with them, stay in touch, maybe have just one-on-ones after just meeting at like any of these events or community kind of group meetings or Slack channels. And I think that starts to build a real relationship that can last a long time. And I continue to think about the true value of all these communities are the personal relationships we have with folks many years down the line. And we continue to still help each other, check in with each other at times when things get tough, support each other in different ways. And so I think that's really key. Yeah. So, all right, maybe we should come back to the topic. And I want to throw out a term that maybe you can define for our listeners here. So, cargo cult mentality. And when you, especially in the context of joining a community and talking to other agency owners, why is this such an important kind of concept to understand and to avoid?
Yeah, so a cargo cult mentality is sort of stuff like copying what other people are doing without understanding why it works or the background. And kind of the origin of this term comes in World War II, where like islanders, they ended up building like runways and radio towers on their islands after the war, believing that these are the things that brought supply planes, like they brought food and supplies and stuff to their island. So they're like, all right, if we just build more runways and more towers, more planes will come, right? Without really understanding like the background behind it. So in the same way, like in the agency world, like if you just copy someone's like pricing model or like how they do their org chart or how they run their internal processes, like just because it looks successful and it worked for another person, like without really understanding like why did it work? Like what are all like the underlying decisions and reasons why it worked for them in particular? You're gonna run into this cargo cult type of thing where you'll be building things without having any results from it.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you just like from personal experience of like falling into this very trap. So I remember this is maybe 12 plus years ago, going to like one of the first kind of owner camps, and I was impressionable, like not even just I think still in my late 20s or something, and kind of like I was I was one of the younger folks there, and I remember like just listening to all these super experienced folks talk about XYZ things, about just they seem so much more knowledgeable. And I just came back to the office like brimming with like couple dozen ideas of like, oh my God, we're not doing this, we need to do this. We're not doing this, we need to do that. And it's just like I remember just overwhelming the team with like, hey, these are all the things we're not doing, we got to do it. And it was even a pattern because like we'd attend subsequent owner camps after that. And like just I remember the team would just grow and like, oh God, it's Peter went to another one of these things, and it's gonna be more slew of ideas. But like, some of these things maybe worked out and were actually positive, but then many of them like without the fundamental understanding of like, hey, like why is this good for us? And like what is it beyond just copying what someone successful or perceived to be successful is doing? Like just it would fall apart, or just it wouldn't make sense after you try to implement it without any grounded principles. And so I think over time, obviously we wisened up and we're like, okay, first of all, there's no like right way to do things. There's no like everyone could kind of solve problems in their own way, and context matters. Like really, like your particular situation, problem, the factors, the people, everything, those things are particular to you, and you got to solve it in your particular way. And you can learn from how others have kind of approached the problem. You can't blindly copy and expect the solution.
Yeah, I remember those days, and I think over time we kind of learned on how to like activate all the learnings that we got from these conferences and from peers. And I think the way that we evolved is thinking about these ideas as like hypotheses. Like, how do we like try something out, not just take this thing to copy, but it's like, all right, can this element work in our organization? Start small, like see maybe with a smaller group of people, try it out and see if there's something we can measure to enact some bigger change, test, do something small, roll it out. And then I think, but ultimately it's really understanding like what are the underlying first principles of the business for your own systems, like what is your team, what is your culture, what are you ultimately trying to achieve? And all of these, if you understand that at a baseline level, all these ideas are layers that you can really think about how it can impact and work within your own structure.
Yeah, no, totally. And
Yeah.
this is why I think it's a powerful lesson. And I'm glad we've kind of internalized it a bit because even today, we come across a lot of different agencies in our conversations for Barrel Holdings. And some are really impressive and they're doing really cool stuff. But I think we had kind of built the muscle where we're not like automatically being like, all right, we need to do that in our agencies. But we're more like, all right, like how and why is it that this works for them? And what aspects of it are actually applicable to any of our agencies, if at all? And going back to what you said, like what are the small tests we can run to see if these things are valid for our agencies? So I think we built that little framework to kind of avoid the cargo cult mentality.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's overall, despite all the mistakes that we may have made, all of the external learnings and just meeting with people, it really has helped us give perspective in our own business. Because oftentimes, if you're just in your own world, you're siloed and that's all you see, like it's hard to have perspective and just being able to go reflect and get some external knowledge just helps, overall, even for your well-being on reflecting on your own business.
Yeah, definitely. All
Yeah.
right, great. I think that's a good place
Yeah.
to end it there. Remember, great agencies aren't built in isolation. So seek out those who you can learn from, and that will totally accelerate your growth and learning. All right, catch you next time.